Playboi Carti's Whole Lot of Red was one of the most anticipated albums in his career. Fans were expecting a return to the lush, spacey, atmospheric vibe of Die Lit, but on Christmas Day, we're met with something that was the complete opposite. Whole Lot of Red's energy is chaotic, abrasive, and bad. Upon release, it was met with mixed reception, but there was still a part of his fan base that saw it for the experimental project that it was. People were criticizing the unorthodox production and how abrasive it sounded, and other people were just trying to cope. This is especially because this is the last album he would put out for 5 years. Today, we're going to explore how Whole Lot of Red isn't just a trap album, it's a punk album in disguise. Fans were anticipating Whole Lot of Red to carry the torch from Carti's prior album, Die Lit, which was a spacey, atmospheric, very vibey project. Instead, it leaned towards stripped down synths, distorted 808s, and bizarre vocal choices and mixing. The production was muddy, chaotic, abrasive, and it makes sense why so many people were let down and surprised by this release. Tracks like Stop Breathing, Rockstar Made, New Tank were aggressive and had a lot more energy than his projects that he had beforehand. It would take a while for this album to ferment and kind of sit with the public for a while. The album's vampire aesthetic was another interesting choice. A lot of people didn't really understand it, especially because Carti doesn't really explore this theme or aesthetic that far other than 2 songs. A lot of his diehard fans liked the idea and aesthetic, but a lot of passive fans and even mainstream audiences thought it was kind of corny. But with all of this said, there's an underlining theme of hardcore punk within the heart of this album. Fast forward 1 year and the rage subgenre is born. This subgenre involves loud, buzzy, and aggressive elements. Rage found its place in the hip-hop community, taking a lot of elements from underground SoundCloud artists and music. Artists under Playboi Carti's Opium label, like Homicide Gang, Ken Carson, and Destroy Lonely, are continuing to push the sound forward. But with all of this said, there's an underlining theme of hardcore punk within the heart of this album. Just as hardcore punk music took rock and flipped it on its head, so has Playboi Carti with trap. Hardcore punk was born out of the rebellion of the Reagan administration's stronger push towards capitalist and conservative evangelicism policies. The reaction to Reagan's America was music that was loud, aggressive, raw, and sometimes even violent. Underground scenes in LA, DC, and New York City exploded with new bands and energy. In a similar way, Playboi Carti has brought the underground trap genre into a more mainstream focal point. The past few years of trap have taken a more dark and edgier turn towards this raw and abrasive style. Albums like Travis Scott's Utopia, for example, take this sound and push it farther into the mainstream. Songs like Fiend, Modern Jam, and Hyena all utilize this style, and even elements of Kanye West's Yeezus are making a comeback. Hardcore punk is defined by aggressive energy, fast tempos, and rebellious lyrics. The genre started primarily from bands who wanted to deviate from the corporate-friendly, structured radio at the time. In 2020, trap was also in a similar state. The genre was using pop elements that had been laid out 5-6 years beforehand, and there wasn't really much growth. While Carti's lyrics might not be politically charged, his style was never lyrically based to begin with. The energy and rawness of Whole Lotta Red was a lot more important and focal to Carti's main style. Like Kanye West's Yeezus, who also executively produced this album, Whole Lot of Red employed a style of mixing that could be seen as unpolished or even bad. Distorted 808s, harsh hi-hats, and Carti's piercing vocals made this album feel more confrontational. In a lot of ways, this mirrored the DIY aesthetic of early hardcore 80s bands. What many people saw as a flaw soon became a part of the album's charm. This is very similar to how early 80s bands had a sense of rawness and harsh mixing and not even the best recording equipment. Hardcore punk was a reaction to its time, and much like that, Whole Lotta Red is a reaction to the the current state of trap and hip hop. Hardcore punk took rock's more familiar structures and broke them down into simpler, harsher, and more unfiltered elements. Playboi Carti has done a similar thing with trap, taking a lot of traditional elements and stripping them down into more raw and abrasive style. Carti is also inspired by punk culture. In 2018, in an interview with Dazed, he said that he was shifting more into a new punk phase. This highlights his deliberate style shift into a more abrasive and hardcore style. Furthermore, the cover art of Whole Lot of Red pays homage to the late 70s, early 80s punk rock magazine Slash. Playboi Carti has obviously taken inspiration from punk's visual style and aesthetic. His whole vampire persona resembles something close to the Misfits, with face paint and theatrics, and even takes elements from horror punk bands like TSOL. Playboi Carti also has a tattoo on his stomach of early melodic hardcore pioneers Bad Religion. The X'd out cross resembles rebellion and kind of a rejection to the conservative Christian nationalism. It's an icon against authority and the current status quo. Punk rock's early culture is rooted in rebellion. Whether it's political, social, or cultural, punk stands for rejecting the status quo. Whole Lot of Red might not have a specific political message, but he's never really been a lyricist, and he lets the energy and the beats he's on kind of define his style. Playboi Carti's style is more about energy and atmosphere. The style Carti takes on Whole Lot of Red is pure, raw self-expression. One of the most significant elements of Whole Lot of Red is how it translates into live shows. Carti brought a certain edge to trap and hip hop that hasn't been seen in a while. Hardcore punk shows were known for their energy, mosh pits, and sometimes even violence. Compared to modern hip hop shows, Carti feels a lot more inspired by metal and hardcore punk. The delivery atmosphere is more aggressive and raw. Moshing, screaming, and sometimes even fighting is a lot more intense compared to the traditional energy that trap shows have put on. Playboi Carti's Whole Lot of Red might not be a traditional punk album, but it shares the same rebellious and experimental edge that hardcore punk once had at a time. The album's abrasive production, experimental styles, and chaotic energy mark it as a genre-defining project. A lot of its influence for the hip-hop and trap sphere shows a lot of parallels to how hardcore punk shifted rock's energy into a more aggressive state. So, do you agree with the comparisons between Whole Lot of Red and hardcore punk? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This is my first video on this channel. I want to kind of keep it hardcore punk or just punk related. But if y'all have any ideas for videos that you might want me to make, just let me know in the comments. Thank you. Be sure to like and subscribe.